All right, guys, Wes here. Welcome back to the channel, and we just got some exciting news for God of War Ragnarok, as according to a reliable leaker, The Snitch, our hopes and dreams of God of War Ragnarok DLC are not dead just yet. As according to the new leak, it seems that Sony Santa Monica could be continuing the Norse Saga, not through a spin-off game, but through God of War Ragnarok. So today we're going to go over all of the God of War Ragnarok DLC news, this brand new leak, and discuss what this means for the future of the game, where the story DLC could take us, and so much more. Also, real quick, guys, I'm giving away a PlayStation 5 for 130,000 subscribers. If you guys would like to enter, it's super easy. All you have to do is subscribe to the channel, comment your Twitter handle, tweet me proof that you're subscribed, and I've got the full details in the pinned comment. So as a quick recap for those of you that are new to the channel, or maybe for those of you who just picked up God of War Ragnarok, the game was incredibly popular and it wrapped up the main Norse timeline, but it still left a ton of unanswered questions. Certain character arcs were left a tad unfinished, and certain mysteries about the story were never concluded. Now, obviously, there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of player interpretation in your story, but many fans of the God of War franchise were hoping for something a little bit more definitive before we officially leave the Norse timeline behind for another full reset with God of War 6. Now, rumors of a story expansion were floating around ever since the game came out, and there's been a ton of little bits and pieces of information to go off of, but nothing really concrete. Various members of the Ragnarok cast made vague statements about their characters returning in the future, which seemed to suggest that there would be either a God of War Ragnarok DLC or some kind of Atreus spin-off game in the pipeline at Sony Santa Monica, although nothing was ever explicitly confirmed. But a few months ago, it was discovered that Santa Monica Studios had been posting job listings for high-ranking positions that required the applicant to be intimately familiar with the gameplay of both God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok, implying that the studio is working on something new in the Norse timeline. However, Sony and Santa Monica Studios have remained completely silent on the matter, and as far as we officially know, there's not going to be any DLC for God of War Ragnarok. But according to a brand new leak from the infamous The Snitch leaker, it seems that God of War Ragnarok DLC might be in the works. Now, things could change, obviously. Santa Monica Studios could have shut down the project so that they could focus on their next game, which is the sci-fi game that they're currently working on. So I would still take this with a grain of salt, but let's go ahead and talk about the news, because I do think that because The Snitch is talking about it, there is a little bit of validity to it. Now, the big God of War Ragnarok DLC leak started on August 24th when a known gaming insider who goes by the screen name The Snitch posted tweets of a giant envelope in an undisclosed location. What followed was very interesting. It was an ARG scavenger hunt for information that The Snitch claims that pertains to a paid DLC for God of War Ragnarok. In a Twitch stream that same day, The Snitch claimed that a reliable source has told him that Sony is working on DLC for Ragnarok, and his final hint was a static image of a clock with the hour hand on 4, the minute hand on 12, and the seconds hand on 3. Now, some have interpreted this as a date like 4, 3, and 12, or maybe 12, 3, 4, but honestly, I'm not sure I buy that, since none of those numbers would accurately represent a year. Now, the current rumor that's been floating around is that rather than God of War Ragnarok getting DLC, they're going to continue on the Norse timeline in the form of a spin-off game with Atreus as the lead, and the game will be more like an Uncharted Lost Legacy or a Miles Morales spin-off game. Honestly, both would be perfectly fine. I think DLC for Ragnarok makes the most sense, but having a game that is completely separate, that is starring Atreus, would also be pretty interesting, especially if they make the name something along the lines of like God of Mischief. That title would absolutely go hard, but I don't see Sony, or rather Santa Monica Studios, doing that because of how much name recognition that God of War Ragnarok as a video game has. Releasing DLC for that would sell much better than them releasing a spin-off game starring Atreus. But we'll talk more about that spin-off game in just a minute. Now, according to The Snitch, they insist that God of War Ragnarok DLC is on the way, and he even pinned the tweet on top of his profile reiterating it. Funnily enough, he actually got hit with a community note saying that Sony Santa Monica themselves called DLC unlikely, but The Snitch has got a number of correct things over the years, and the fact that he basically hosted an ARG to reveal this leak means he must be pretty confident on it. This DLC or expansion could be the reason that Santa Monica Studios has been heavily hiring for their next game, but honestly, who knows? It's kind of a toss-up at this point. Now, according to the game director Eric Williams on the Kind of Funny spoiler cast, he essentially said that he didn't know and he wouldn't count on future DLC for God of War Ragnarok, but he never really ruled it out. So there are a few things that this could result in. There's been a ton of rumors about a potential Atreus spin-off game floating around, because while the mainline God of War series is moving on to a new setting with the next game, that doesn't mean that we're never going to see the Norse setting again. Plus, with how insanely successful God of War Ragnarok was, Sony likely wants to keep that hype train chugging along before leaving that setting behind. Now, people may miss the classic hack and slash God of War titles, but the rebooted Norse timeline was way more successful, and Sony loves milking their IP as much as possible, except for Bloodborne, which is weird. Maybe they forgot the files or lost them somewhere. But either way, I wouldn't be shocked if they were looking for ways to get some more content out of this story before closing the book officially. Plus, God of War has had plenty of spin-off games throughout the years, some of which were really popular like Ascension and Chains of Olympus, so a spin-off game starring Atreus sounded like a really good idea, but now that the Snitch is insistent that there is indeed going to be DLC in the works, it's very possible that this spin-off was the DLC all along. Now, some people have been quick to dismiss the rumors of any new Norse-themed God of War project due to wishful thinking from fans, and while I totally understand where those people are coming from, you have to admit that there is quite a lot of evidence to suggest that something is in the works. Santa Monica Studios is looking for new team members that were familiar with the gameplay of the Norse timeline, and multiple cast members have stated that their characters are coming back despite the Norse timeline being over, at least in the mainline series. While these standalone Atreus spin-off game rumors may have been a little large scale, I can easily believe that Sony is taking those ideas and working on a massive DLC instead. Even though Kratos' story is pretty well wrapped up at this point, there are still a ton of directions that Atreus could go. The character had a really emotional send-off in the main campaign of God of War Ragnarok, and many fans have been waiting to see more of him. Focusing the new story on Atreus and his solo arc would be a great way to keep players engaged with the story without altering the universe too much or making things too large scale right before transitioning to God of War 6. Now, I'll admit that it'd be pretty weird to have a God of War game that doesn't star Kratos, but with how emotional Atreus' story was and how much room there is for an expansion in this universe, I'm totally okay with a change of perspective. Now, when it comes to a reveal date or when we could expect to get some kind of solid news on DLC, I'm expecting there to be some kind of official announcement at the next PlayStation showcase, which is currently rumored to be taking place sometime right before the launch of Marvel Spider-Man 2, probably in the second half of September. Now, Sony hasn't officially confirmed a PlayStation showcase, but tons of insiders have claimed that Sony has something cooking before the launch of Spidey so that they could show off new gameplay and tease other first-party projects. This would be the perfect time to confirm some kind of DLC for Ragnarok, even if that's not actually going to be launching for a while. Sony needs some wins right now, and simply confirming DLC for Ragnarok would be good enough to get the internet talking again. Now, as for when the DLC is actually going to launch, I think it's at least another 6 to 8 months away. Sony Santa Monica was posting those job listings a few months ago. There was also a recent one, and assuming that they found those people that they wanted to hire, that could mean that the DLC entered full production at best within the last month or two. That's not to say the work hasn't been done already. I'm pretty sure that Sony Santa Monica had a pretty good story planned out for this for quite some time, and since this is going to be an expansion as opposed to a whole new game, it's not going to take nearly as long to develop. That being said, game development takes a long time nowadays, and I'm doubtful that the expansion is going to have nearly as many people working on it as the mainline game would have, especially whenever you consider the fact that Cory Barlog has a new sci-fi game in the works that I'm sure is about to enter full production, and we'll have a reveal for that probably within the next year or so. But either way, I would assume that DLC work is likely moving at a lot slower pace than the main game, as they don't have a deadline at this point. Maybe there's an internal deadline from Sony, but I think the next 3 to 6 months are about to be very special for God of War Ragnarok. Not only do we have this new potential DLC, but there's going to be the PC port as well. We still don't have that announcement. So imagine if they announced God of War Ragnarok and then bundled it with the Atreus spin-off game in one big package and then release it on the PC at the same time, similar to how they did Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection, where it's both Uncharted 4: A Thief's End and Uncharted Lost Legacy in one package costing $49.99. Obviously, God of War Ragnarok would be $70 plus another $15 to $20 expansion. Or if they go the Miles Morales route, then they'll charge probably $40 just for the expansion itself, which would be really interesting. I know a lot of people were hesitant to buy Miles Morales at launch due to the fact that they charged so much on a game that was utilizing the same game world as the first game. I personally don't see a problem with it, but I know a lot of people do. But this is God of War Ragnarok we're talking about, so I don't think that anyone's going to care if we get to continue the Norse Saga, whether that's Atreus as lead or Kratos again. But back to the release date discussion. Personally, I think if Sony is willing to confirm and announce God of War Ragnarok DLC next month at a potential showcase, that means that this DLC will launch likely 5 to 7 months after, which would put the launch somewhere in the first few months of 2024. I could be a little bit off base with that, but that's just my personal prediction. But what do you guys think? Do you think that there's actually a Ragnarok DLC in the works? And if so, when do you think this thing is going to come out? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section. Also, guys, if you enjoyed my coverage of God of War Ragnarok on this channel, do me a favor and subscribe with your notifications turned on so you don't miss out on any future news videos. Don't forget to enter the 130,000 subscriber PS5 giveaway. And until next time, this has been Wes, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.